Okay, so instead of claps, you can just say something bizarre. I'll say snow speeder, and you'll say,
Pink maggots.
that's fine. That's gross, but that's fine. There's nothing I really wanted to talk about from last time, except that I now have set up a YouTube channel for us, and
Which you can find at.
which you can find at some URL unbeknownst to me because you can't claim your own URLs on YouTube anymore.
Oh, I didn't know that. I was thinking about trying to do a new. Because the way that they did it is that they now have like those spin-off that are sort of creations, or at least last time I checked, and I was thinking about adding something to my Magic Card YouTube channel.
Are you eating on a podcast?
I am.
Gonna get some really nice sounds for the audience there.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to wait.
It's alright, I'll just mute you. just I'll just mute you the entire time you're like um, I did set up a YouTube channel, and there will be a link in the show notes. iTunes is still being a pain in the ass. As far as the listeners know, we might already have that set up and all smooth, but at my present time, it's not quite working out. So
Well, is the YouTube channel the? Did you get the Gravity Well?
no. To get your own URL on YouTube now, you have to have like 500 subscribers.
Oh, that is really odd.
And you have to have like at least one video, and you have to have cover art. Yeah. So you can't do that anymore. YouTube's growing up. We come from an era of YouTube that's like, young YouTube. I started YouTube probably back in 2005. It's probably when I made my first account. Because YouTube didn't start... Well, maybe that's not true. Maybe it was more like 2006 or 7. Because YouTube didn't start until about 2005.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think like when I was like doing my first. I was in Kirkland, so that means that it must have been like 2006, 2007 when I was posting my first videos.
Right, that's right about when John and Hank Green, the Vlog Brothers, I'll put a link for
Very
those who don't know.
first started, yeah.
Right, that's when they first started. The topic I picked for today, which last time you were kind of begrudging against, was I would love to hear, and I think the audience would love to hear, some of the college stories that we have to share.
Well, I think that you should go first.
You think I should go first? I didn't have one off the top of my head.
Do you did you have a roommates in college?
Yeah, I totally had roommates in college. So my first year, I went to a small college in my hometown and left very quickly after that to go to the University of Oregon. And I was in the dorms for a year. I had one roommate and a bunch of hall mates at University of Oregon. And my hallmate my roommate was awesome, and we got along great, and we had a blast. And then the year after my first year, I was still going to U of O, and I went and lived in a house with 3 other, I guess I would say boys, because we were not quite men. Yeah, I don't think we were quite men yet. I still think everybody in that house was very college age, and I would consider that to be boyhood age still.
Well, it kind of depends on your actions. That's really what defines your actions and behavior. Be like anybody like putting fart cushions like trying under your seat and stuff like that, and
No,
pranks left and right.
no, but we played a lot of video games and did not clean up very often. And the combination of those two things makes me think that we probably weren't men yet. I don't know if I still even consider myself a man fully. There are still a lot of boyish qualities. Maggie likes to remind me that I'm like a 12-year-old occasionally.
Oh, well, I'm still like that. Well, actually, I'm actually worse than that, where Christine would be like, you were such a 5-year-old, because, I'll do certain things that are very childlike, and I very much embrace my inner child. So I'm just like, no, this is actually a very cool rock. Do you feel it? It feels cool. Like it's all rough and sandy. It's a cool rock. And she'll be like, you're such a little boy.
My little boy stuff is more like terrible fart jokes or things like that. Stupid, silly things that, 12-year-olds would find funny, but men should definitely not find funny at all. So, in my dorms, I had some friends who lived kind of a few blocks away, just off campus, and I was good friends with them, and I decided that the time was ripe to prank them. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but, you have the benefit of hearing the story for the first time with the rest of the audience, that I dressed up in full ninja garb. I looked the part, and I had prepared a large printed poster, which I rolled on my back using a bamboo shoot. So it was extra ninja themed. And I ran from my dorms at like 2 a.m. to their house, to their apartment. And outside their window on the second story, I managed to put on the outside of their window, which was quite difficult, a very large poster of Donald Trump.
Why did you go with Donald Trump?
Because he's horrific looking. He's not a pretty man. And after that, I proceeded to do the same thing, and was almost caught in the act. So what I did is I found some really large poster paper, and my plan was to take some duct tape and this very thick, large poster paper and tape it on the outside of their door, so that in the morning when they woke up and had to go to class, they'd have to bust through this construction paper. Okay, and this was after the Donald Trump incident.
You were pranking the same individuals?
Yes.
They deserved it.
Right. So they had the way their building was set up was, so they had kind of like a hallway staircase area, which was kept unlocked, and their individual rooms were locked. It was a very safe area of campus. It wasn't like a big deal or anything, and that area was just like accessible. And I noticed while I was there that there was kind of like a downstairs back door exit through a laundry room. Okay, so I entered through there. I started to set up my poster board prank, or my construction paper prank. And then I realized that they were up still. It was pretty late. It was like, 1:30 or 2, but that's not really late for college kids.
No, that's like...
Even on a weeknight, which it was.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
I could hear them in there, so
yeah,
I was
really, you should have chosen, with college people, you should choose like 8 o'clock in the morning. That's when everybody's asleep.
That is, yeah, but I was asleep then, so I'm not going to do that. So I start to set it up. I'm trying to be very quiet. If you're ever trying to be quiet and you have like some kind of plastic or paper thing, it's impossible, right? It's like extra loud. So I'm setting this up and they hear me, or like I think they hear me, and I kind of leap down the stairs toward the laundry room and hide around the corner in the laundry room, ready to bolt. And they go back to what they were doing, and I start to set it up again, and then the door opens. Oh. And I'm still in full ninja gear. My face is covered. They can't really tell who I am. I bolt down the stairs into the laundry room, wait for a split second to hear what they're saying, and they bust through the construction paper and look at me and go, "Hey!" And I bolt out the back door, and I'm hiding in some bushes out back. And I'm hoping that they will overlook me, but the two roommates, they come out and they're starting looking around, and I realize that one of my friends, he is going to come around the corner and see me. So the moment before he can do that and, maybe take advantage, I bolt, and because it was kind of like the back of a building, I had to leap over a car. And
going all James Bond parkour thing.
Yeah, I did. I parkoured over a car very quickly. I ran across the street. There were no cars, so we were fine. Into the campus graveyard, and hid in some bushes behind the
The
campus.
campus has a graveyard?
Yeah. It's a really old, like, colonial graveyard or something. Convenient, really, is what it was. And I was able to hide in some bushes in the graveyard. And, the other roommate who hadn't followed me around the car, he was slightly slower because I took the shortcut and I went over the car. He was walking, and the other roommate ended up grabbing his car, and they were driving around looking for me. So that prank was like half successful.
Well, I'm surprised that they didn't recognize you, because even in a fully black outfit, you kind of have a very lanky body type that's like... I think I'd recognize you by your ankles, and your calves, honestly.
Well, that's true. I think I agree, but they definitely didn't recognize me because I think that based on that I was running and that everybody's adrenaline was pumping, right, and that it was very dark and I was in full black, that it was hard to see. So eventually, they had an upstairs roommate who was my best friend.
Oh, okay.
My best friend lived upstairs from them, from my childhood. And I told him what I had done and who it was. And he was in the apartment at the time that I was doing it. Right. And he betrayed me, and he told them. And so betrayal. They put my phone number on a gay Craigslist put board, which I felt was lackluster.
Did you get any calls?
I got a text, and I thought it was one of them.
Well, right.
Joking with me, so I responded jokingly to a gay man. Wow, I feel bad.
I know, you just totally let down the guy who's just looking for
I did. I totally
fun,
did.
Quick night.
So, yeah. So, anyway, and then I had threatened and joked with them that I had left a dead fish in their apartment and they would find it soon. I didn't do that. I've always wanted to leave a dead fish somewhere for someone to find. That's exactly why I wanted to. Anyway, so that's my...
That being said, like saying, by the way, I've left a dead fish in your apartment. You should find it. That would be like, I'd be totally paranoid. I'd be like, oh my God.
That's exactly why I said that. Is to basically scare them into thinking that, they had it somewhere and they needed to find it.
Yeah, that is bad.
Your college story also has to do with roommates, but it more has to do with
one particular roommate,
them being terrible.
So I'm gonna preface that by like saying that I went to a junior college for 2 years and I lived at home, and I do have a couple stories from there, but junior college is sort of a different experience, and I think in a lot of ways it was better academically than like a 4-year college. But when you move into a dorm or you go to a college, typically they'll make you live in the dorms for like the first year. That's pretty common around the States. If you're going to a university in the States, it's pretty common that they'll make you live in a dorm for the first year. And I went to Washington State University, and the roommate the first roommate I had, he was kind of like a jock personality type, and what was kind of weird is that he definitely sort of believed in like, personifying a stereotypical label. And so he was very sort of lost in college because he wasn't, like, he'd gotten an academic scholarship based on sportsmanship qualities, right? So he wasn't like good enough to do sports on a college level, but that's basically how like he was getting some of his money from there. But we didn't really hit it off, and of course at that time I was going uber geek, where I was basically printing out pictures of Chandrasekhar and Einstein and Heisenberg and like posting them to my wall. I had Planck above my bed, and like
You've outed yourself as a nerd before.
Yeah.
But yes, understanding the depth of your nerdiness is perfectly
Yeah,
okay.
no, there weren't Pokemon on my wall, and there wasn't like girls in cosplay. There was like people in very epic beards, like James Maxwell, the father of electromagnetism, and like Faraday and stuff like that.
Well, I'm not sure Pokemon even existed at the time.
I think it was actually in its heyday. Anyway,
Oh.
this like mystified my jock like roommate. Like he didn't know what all these like old men were doing on the walls. He thought that was very like weird. As far as like his sort of behavior, like he was very enamored with the fact that there was underage drinking going on, but unfortunately he couldn't really hold his liquor. So I would come home like almost always like on the weekend where he'd be like throwing up outside of our window, which I thought was really
That's
terrible because
terrible.
like one, we were like on the second story, and like who wants
So there was a nice big splash radius.
right, who wants to be like on the first story and see like vomit like basically go out your window? And it's not exactly as if you could stick your head out and go, "What is this shower?" Because that would be really bad. But anyway, the other thing about him that like drove me nuts is that at the time I was still very much in sort of a music collector sort of thing where I listened to all kinds of music from all kinds of different things, right? And he only wanted to listen to a single album from Third Eye Blind.
Which to this day you still won't listen to?
I might be able to listen to Third Eye Blind now, but like I listened to it so much that I absolutely despised Third Eye Blind, despite the fact that I thought they were fine before I'd ever like listened to it. So I was like, oh my gosh, how many years is it gonna take to like recover from this musical trauma? So anyway, we didn't really get along. Like we were very cordial to each other, but we were not enamored with each other to be each other's roommates. And
At least it was civil.
yeah, and one of my friends from Green River, like a friend of a friend, said, "Hey, I'm going to Wazoo. Like we should like live together." And so when the turn of the semester came, we're like, "Yeah, let's live together." And thus I got my roommate Dave. And Dave was a character. Like he naturally always got himself into trouble, and I didn't really understand how this was possible until I lived with him. One of the first
You're not really a troublemaker.
one of the first things that like we did is that like he had two big when he first moved in, he had two big agendas. One was to set up a sound system, and the other one was to basically do something with the phone that he was displeased about because they just gave you one of those 19 sort of 80s telephones. It wasn't a rotary phone, but you could tell the thing was decades old, and the phone itself was like so plastic. You know how you get like a certain item where it was just like it was the epitome of like plastic technology just because the entire thing was like monoplastic except for the receiver and the curly Q cord, right? There was like no way to
Right.
there
So
was
it
no
was
way to
terrible.
mount it to a wall. There was no way to get away from its gigantic box-like shape that, obviously was from 1985. It was like a relic, an artifact. You were like wondering what to do with it. And he hated the thing. Didn't really bother me. I just set it on a table like by the side, right? But one day I came home and he's like, "So I decided to mount the phone to the wall." And I was like, this was just outside. He caught me outside the door. And I was like, "Well, how did you do that? There's like no mounting hooks on the back of the phone like you'd find. Like, did you like basically, so I was thinking maybe he had posted a frame to like the wall and like set the phone as a box like inside of the frame. Like I think that would have been
Seems reasonable.
Right. I walk in and there is like a 5 foot swath of duct tape going across the wall where he is like taped the wall, this big gigantic plastic phone to the wall with duct tape.
What?
And it's like an iconic sort of like college abstract art thing. It's like so massive. This thing's like 5 feet long. You know, it's like you walk into the room and it's like, it's so eye catching. And I'm like, Dave, what the did you do? This thing is horrendous. And like, you put duct tape onto the wall, and you know how that resin gets over everything. And what is this? What is this that you've done? Like, you've taped over the push numbers. Like, how are you supposed to dial the number? And he's like, well, you can kind of feel it under the tape. I'm like, no, Dave, that doesn't work. Like, this is not cool. And so then he's like, no, I got it. So I watch him for the next 3 minutes while he proceeds to sort of use a knife that he always carried in his pocket to cut around all the numbers, right? And he's like, there, it's fixed. And I'm like, so I go up and I try it, and of course, like, now it has like the sort of, the adhesive on it.
Sticky.
And yeah, and so I go down to press a number, I press the number, and it doesn't pop back out. Like, the spring cannot behind the number and can no longer, like, overcome the stuck down thing. So I'm like, look at this. This is terrible. Like, it gets stuck every other time when I try to, like, press this number and that number. And it's all dirty. It's just going to collect dust now that this adhesive is all over our phone, like, thing. And what about this? And I grab the cord, and of course the phone receiver, because it wasn't meant to hang up the wall, it doesn't have like a hook on the phone receiver here. So the phone receiver is just dangling. And he's like, well, after like 2 minutes, the dial tone just cuts off, and then all you have to do is press the little button and it's all good to go. And I'm like, no, this is terrible. Like, what are you doing? There needs to be some place to have the receiver. You can't just let it dangle by the cord all the time. One, it's probably going to ruin the receiver because it's like it'll pull on all the connections. And two, like, I don't want to listen to dial tone for 3 minutes every time I listen to the phone, so waiting for it to shut off, like the beep, 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 beep. No, that's not cool. And he's like, okay, I have a solution. So he then, like, the little button that, would normally be pressed down by the weight of the receiver to cut off dial tone, he sticks a dab of, duct tape to that, and he's like, see? And he just, like, rips it back and forth, to, like, show that he's like, okay, now you have dial tone. Tape it back up. Now you don't have dial tone. Undo the tape. Now you have dial tone. Now you don't have dial tone. I'm like, oh my god, Dave. And the receiver. And this is where it got really crazy. He, like, took an old shoe of his and he put that on the wall, and then he sort of replicated his monstrosity of the phone on a smaller scale. It was only 2 feet or 3 feet wide of duct tape, where he took this old shoe and he duct taped it to the wall. And he's like, we can just put the receiver in this. And I'm like, that is so gross. I don't want to have something that's going to go next to my mouth and against my head stuck in this old shoe. And he's like, well, it's clean. And I'm like, dude, it's not clean. You can clearly see the scuff marks, and like, it's gonna smell.
Oh my god.
And he's like, no. It's been. I haven't worn the shoe in years. It's totally aired out. It's fine. I'm like, this is unacceptable. He's like, well, just give it a couple days, and we'll find out. And I don't know what happened after that, because, like, and 2 days later it was, it was back on the desk and remained there for the remainder of our time. But I think what happened is, like, one of his girls that he was trying to impress probably came over it and remarked on its ostentatiousness. But yeah, it was a monstrosity.
That's terrible. That is really bad.
So anyway, the other thing that he wanted to do when he first got set up was do his sound system. And so what he decided to do is that he was going to take his speaker amplifier and hook it up to a car battery. And at the time I didn't think much about it, and like, at the time I was also taking my electronics lab, so I'm like wondering what the fuck I was thinking. But he hooked his entire amplifier and his sound system, because it needed to be like powered. And I think at the time, why didn't he just use an outlet? I have no idea. Was it like he needed a certain voltage that the couldn't provide? I don't remember.
Yeah, that must have been it. He must have needed like some extra oomph.
I don't know. It's like seems like what you would do is you'd buy a power strip and just plug the amplifier into there, but maybe he used a car amplifier versus like maybe it was like maybe that's why he did it. Anyway,
Wow.
he didn't put any resistors or any sort of ballast onto the amplifier. And so I came home one day, and the way that the dormitories were in this particular dorm room, it was basically just a long hallway with doors on either side. So it was like it was just like one of those sort of
Standard dorm room.
no, because I lived in dorm rooms that were just really not like that. It's like the sort of the prison cell dormitory sort of look, where it's just like a long hallway with doors on either side. But it's something that you'll find everywhere. You're right, it's pretty standard. Um, but I came home one day and the dorm is on fire, and I'm like, oh shit! And I walk into like the thing, the entire long hallway is just like filled up with like black smoke, and it's like about a foot and a
Whoa.
half, like on the ceiling. And I'm like, oh no, I gotta go get like my computer and my stuff for my room. And I run down the hallway only to discover to my horror that the smoke is billowing out of our room. And I'm like, oh no, and of course, like immediately, this is my thought, and I'm somewhat ashamed to say it, but at the same time, it was so prominent that, what did Dave do now?
That's like your first thought.
That was my first thought, because like the day before he'd told me the story of basically how they went joyriding in an SUV, and almost like they basically jumped a foot trail and almost like hit a runner on the foot trail.
Oh my gosh.
So it's just like one of those things where like the decisions that they would tend to do were pretty
Poor.
reckless.
Report,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I was like, yeah, so when I saw the smoke billowing out of our dorm room, I was like, oh no, what did Dave do now? That was like my assumption. And sure enough, I walk in and Dave is frantically trying to get the smoke like the thing, and he's like pulling everything out from behind his bed, and I'm like, Dave, what's going on? And I run to the dorm window and I put my hand to open it up, and he clutches my wrist in like a death grip. He's like, you can't do that. And I'm like, Dave, the room is filled with smoke. And I say this while I'm coughing over the smoke. He's like, yeah, but if you open that window, then they'll know. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, the smoke alarms haven't gone out yet. And the smoke alarms haven't gone out yet. And like, no one will know that like this is like going on. And of course, everybody's trying to he closes the door from our dorm room, for like he kind of cracks it, and like he's like, yeah, there was electrical fire. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, apparently the batteries were too much. And he holds up the speaker wire. And of course, what he'd done is he'd used this really thin plastic coated speaker wire direct from a car battery, which has enough power to jump a solenoid and like the motor, right? It was just like way too much power for this little teeny speaker wire. And of course the speaker wire caught at fire, and all the black smoke was from where the fire basically burned the entire plastic sheathing up until
Wow.
his bed. So it burned like 5 feet of basically speaker wire, and that's what all the black smoke was.
Ugh.
So anyway, about 20 minutes later, there was this investigation, and of course, I'm just dumbfounded, just standing there watching Dave run back and forth, and of course he gets everything out of the room that would be incriminating evidence, and he's like, oh, I don't know what's going on, and for some reason, he got away with it, but I was like, Dave, this is completely irresponsible. He's just like, I
Wow.
didn't know, and I'm like, there's a pattern of behavior here right now, and my final story with living with Dave is, and this is like one of those bad sort of if you're a male and you have roommates, or you're thinking about getting other male roommates, you should be aware that this is actually a very common experience, which is that the trade-off of, oh, I'll clean this week, you clean that week, right?
Okay, so this is something that happened to me that I was probably a culprit of when I was living in the house with the three other dudes. Is that, you wanted to clean up your dishes, or the other guys always wanted you to clean up your dishes, or you wanted them to clean up their dishes because, right now you wanted to use it,
Right.
and their dishes are in there, and the sink was pretty small in our place. But yes, this is actually just a problem for college age men everywhere. They do it to each other.
Yeah, but so we'd basically, the dishes story is actually a separate story. This is about taking out the garbage, where we'd basically said that we would take out the garbage every when it came to be like every other week. And so I think I'd taken out the garbage like 3 weeks in a row, and I'm like, Dave, you owe me 3 weeks of taking out the garbage. And like he's like, yeah, I know, I haven't taken out the garbage, and I'm like, dude, this is like an actual issue. We drink, and so we have all kinds of basically glass bottles, and then we basically come home with Chinese takeout or pizza boxes, and like at the time,
Stuff that
like,
gets gross.
yeah, basically at the time the garbage was basically underneath the foot of my bed, so I was like, you needs to go out. And he's like, well, yeah, I'll do it. And he said that for like the next 2 weeks, and I'm like, Dave, if you don't take the garbage out, it's gonna be in your bed. You're gonna find it there. And he's like, we don't really have that much more long until the end of the semester. And I'm like, so what? Like, the garbage still needs to go out between now and then. And he's like, well, does it? And this is how Dave thought. This is like,
Wait, what? Okay, so like right now, and actually I've always just taken out the trash when it gets full. Like whoever's there when it's like pretty full should just take it out. Like
yeah,
just do that.
that's when the garbage is full. What do? Like, this is one of the things that we had when we were with Jeremiah. Is like, we're just like, okay, the garbage is full now. What do you do when the garbage is full? And you're like, you empty it, you take it out. Like, that's what you do with a full garbage. That's correct. That's what you do with a full garbage. But this is something that obviously Dave had not learned, because he was like, listen, this is what we'll do. And he runs to his is basically his clothes cabinet that is kind of like a standing wardrobe, and he empties it out, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, and so I watch him do this for like 5 minutes as he completely empties out his clothes wardrobe.
Which in the same amount of time and effort you'd be able to take out the trash.
And he's like, this is what we'll do. And he basically takes like the bags of garbage that I had basically prepped to basically take out, and he throws them in his clothes wardrobe. And he's like, we'll just do this for the rest of the semester.
How long till the end of the semester at this
It
point?
was like a month and a half or something like that.
No, that's so long.
It had already been like 3 weeks. We basically compiled like 3 weeks of garbage. So it was like, okay, it's going to basically double in size. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, whatever. If you want your clothes wardrobe to smell like that or like be that, whatever. And so anyway, for the next like month and a half, whenever we had like a full bag of garbage, we just tie it off and we throw it in his clothes wardrobe.
That is so disgusting.
And it was going to be his responsibility. He basically claimed the responsibility for like the garbage for the rest of the time.
So what ended up happening to this pile of garbage at the end?
Well, it got massive. Like,
Uh-huh.
now that he had like free reign on like garbage creation, like Dave no longer felt the need to like, stop bringing takeout home. And so like we basically doubled our like takeout cart usage. And like, like he'd buy jugs of like juice, like
Yeah,
orange
like
juice and like milk and stuff like that. And so like basically when it came time to move out, of course, like Dave the procrastinator, I had already like moved out my entire stuff. And I'm like, so like I haven't really what are you gonna do about all the garbage, Dave? Like, you got to be moved out of here by like 2 o'clock today.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just like, well, I'll take it out. And I'm like, okay, well, like, have you looked at how much what it's like? I mean, like, it's been like a month and a half since we did this. He's like, no, not really. I mean, you know how like there's that gap above the wardrobe. I just have been like
Oh.
throwing stuff back there. And I'm just like, well, we're both liable for whatever damages might have incurred, so I'm not really cool with it unless you basically take it out right now. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, but I got to do this and I got to do that, and I got to go meet up with what's her name before she leaves. And I'm like, no, Dave, like this is potentially going to be something against me. I want you to take it out right now. I'm going to watch you. And you're not going to leave until you take it out. And if you don't, you can go off to what's her name, and you're going to find all of your stuff gone because I'm going to move it. And of course, he'd like witnessed me move, and of course, I've always been very good at moving. And he knew that I'd basically packed up my entire stuff like within 3 hours and had it all packed in my car. So I was like, if you don't do it now, you're going to find all your stuff gone when you come back. And of course, something that would take him nearly probably 5 or 6 hours would probably take me 3 hours to do.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, okay, I'll take it out now. And so we open up the wardrobe, and it's just like black garbage bags from like foot to things. Like, this thing's like 3 feet, they're 3 feet wide, 3 feet deep, and like probably like 7 feet tall. And like,
Ugh.
he just like starts grabbing garbage bags and like bucking it to like the garbage thing. And of course, he's having issues because like there happens to be an RA standing outside next to the garbage thing. Like, he can't see into our room, but he can see that Dave is like taking garbage bag after garbage bag after garbage bag. And of course, because it's the end of the semester, the RA was basically told to stand there and make sure that people didn't just leave their garbage bags sitting next to the dumpster, but had to go into the dumpster, which of course is already jam packed full because everybody's moving out, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so Dave's basically climbing up on top of this dumpster and jumping up on down on it so that he can basically get his garbage bags into the garbage dumpster.
Man, I bet he had to take a shower after that.
Well, knowing Dave, he probably just went and saw, what's her name?
That's disgusting.
Because that's kind of the guy that Dave was. He's just like, oh, it'll be fine. That be saying, like, his arrogant confidence totally served him well in the real world. Like, it'll be fine. He became a test driver for cars.
Wow, that makes me feel so much safer knowing knowing that there are cars out there being tested by Dave, the unreliable roommate.
Yeah, yeah, he tests cars now.
Is this is the same roommate with the dishes story too?
No, that was a different roommate.
All right, we'll save that for another time. Then we'll tease it for another time. I was trying to think of any other college stories that I had, but my most significant one was probably the prank one. I'm not sure if anything that exciting happened to me while I was there. I had a lot of good times. I had some great parties. I'm not a huge partier myself, but
Did you have any compromising alcoholic stories where you got too drunk to
remember what happened. No, I've never been so drunk that I have thrown up. So I've been very, very careful about that. I do not like throwing up. I think that it's very avoidable. All you have to do is not drink too much. I have been so drunk where my memory is pretty fuzzy and I don't really remember what happened, but I think that's like the cause of drinking over a longer period of time than all at once. If you drink all at once and your body can't handle it, that's when you get sick, from alcohol poisoning.
See, I can never be a politician because during how like the 90s movies, they had all those like American Pie movies and everything like that, and sort of like the college humor movies. I mean, they still have those kind of today. Trying to think of like the last one I saw like that was. But anyway, at the time there was this college movie where the girl was going to kind of like seduce her boyfriend by putting whipped cream like on her nipples and like on her coochie, and basically, be like we should have some nighttime fun together.
Girls out there, that's a great way to get a yeast infection.
Yeah, no kidding. Anyway, so apparently we were at a party, and it got into my head that I should basically do this.
Wait, okay, I'm assuming you're drunk.
I am plastered. I don't remember too much, but the good thing is that I decided not to put whipped cream on my junk, but I did put it on my nipples. That being said, like what they didn't tell you obviously in the movie magic moments is that it was the movie, right? It wasn't real whipped cream, because if you put real whipped cream on yourself, it'll melt.
Uh-huh.
But this didn't stop me like basically trying it. So I put whipped cream on my nipples and like basically was half naked, and I got on the table with some, I don't know if you guys remember Kush balls, but it's like those the balls, the plastic balls with like the many arms, like the tentacle thingies, like.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they had one of these slip-on rings where you'd slip on the rubber ring and you could play with your little fuzzy plastic ball.
Right, it bounced
And
off
so
your
I
hand.
decided to basically do a half-naked dance on a pool table for the women assembled, because I was all like, yeah,
With
yeah,
melted,
yeah.
with
And-
melted whipped cream
yeah, basically.
running down you.
Anybody want to have some whipped cream, that sort of thing, and going and dancing around on the pool table. But of course, like unfortunately, there was a camera there, and so somewhere
so
out there
that's
is
why you
like,
can't be a politician.
yeah, somewhere out there's some very compromising photos of me standing on a pool table with whipped cream running down my body, saying, "Look at me, I've got sticky titties."
I think that it would only be compromising in the sense that other people wouldn't vote for you, because I have to say, after playing various games and knowing you, you have no shame.
No, I'm very comfortable with the way I am, and yeah, no, I don't really do things that I regret per se. Putting whipped cream on yourself is pretty ill-advised, but it's not really a crime in any greater sense of the word. So.
If I had to see it, it might be a crime.
I remember this one time, like, where our friends were like, they were kind of worried about us because me and this one girl had decided that the stars were beautiful. And yeah, and this is, of course, if anybody's like familiar with Washington State University, it's basically surrounded by just fields of basically wheat and like, just like there's huge fields there. But anyway, in an effort to get away from the light pollution, we decided that we were going to run out into this middle of the field and look up the stars. But because we were drunk, it turned out to be that like she got naked and I basically took off my coat, and we basically ran around in this field for like some absurd amount of time, like 3 hours.
Okay.
But the problem with this is that it was kind of winterish, like autumn, and like so we're like borderline like hypothermia. All of our friends end up like staring at us while we basically go dance like a half a mile out into this field, and like our friends like are later basically like, yeah, we were thinking about coming and getting you because like you guys just pranced around like you were in some sort of fairy dance for hours and hours and hours, and you're all looking at the sky, and of course like she was naked and I was like cold. Anyway, so we finally come back like after like dancing in the field for like 3 or 4 hours. And of course, like she's in bad shape because like she's now like borderline hypothermia sort of thing, and her friends are all like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?"
Yeah, so this wasn't a girl you dated, but you went on like a lot of dates, and I was just like, why did you do that? Why
So
did you?
my many dates was a result of the fact that I really sucked at like
Dating?
being a interesting person to women. So
Mm.
what ended up happening, so like it's not, this is like not a good result. This is like a bad result. What ended up happening is that I was like, you know what, like let's just like I've not been able to like get a girlfriend, and I don't have no girlfriends, and like this has been like a problem for like years, and like you look back on it and be like, oh, it's because I'm just sort of a goofy weird guy, and that's just kind of how
You're
it
an
goes.
introvert. Yeah.
Right. Well, at the time, like in high school, I wasn't an introvert, but anyway, so my to get a girl strategy became, well, let's just ask out everybody. What's the worst that could happen? They'll just say no. And even if like one out of every 100 like says yes, that means that really all I need to do is like ask out like 100 women in 1 month, and I'll have like a date almost every single month. That
Yeah,
was
you're
like my
guaranteed.
that was like my mathematical plan to get a date. Just ask out tons and tons of women, and eventually one of them
Hmm.
would say yes. And
Yeah, the math works out just fine. Like,
yeah, basically I played the odds. I was like, okay, if only one out of every 100 says yes, then I'll still like all I need to do is ask out 100 women, and I'll have a date. That's how I went about it. And it turns out that I was being way pessimistic, and it doesn't take 100 women. You typically don't have to ask out 100 women to get a date. You only have to ask about 30 to 50.
okay.
So basically, if you
Oh
ask
my
out between
gosh.
30 to 50 women, one of them will probably say yes. That's
Yeah.
my
Okay.
experience. So in college, basically, like if I wanted to have a date, I wouldn't go to someone who like I'd met at a party and who I'd hit it off with and that we really got together well and that I liked, or that I'd have a conversation. Now, you also have to realize that because of my degree, it's not like as if there was like a plethora of women in my school. I took physics as an elective. There were exactly two women in my group, one of which I did date. So it's like I dated half of like all the women in physics, you know. So I had to go elsewhere to like find dates, and of course I wasn't like whenever I went to parties and everything like that, we'd get together with friends, of course, which were all engineers, mathematicians, and physicists, which basically meant that it was a sausage fest every single party that I ever went to, right? So I basically had to break outside of there to like go on dates, and so yeah, I asked out hundreds of women when I was in college and went on a date pretty much like every other week as a result of this. But I had some really interesting experiences, like where I'd ask out a girl and she'd be like, "You asked me out 3 months ago," and I said, "Oh, really?" 'Cause, you know, I hadn't remembered
Oh gosh.
asking out the girl already, and I heard all of the, "No, I have a boyfriend," or like what's funny is like you got to know, like be like, "Oh, I'd love to," but typically they'd be very flattered if they had a boyfriend. If they actually had a boyfriend, they would say, "Oh, well, that would be wonderful. You seem like a really nice guy, but I have a boyfriend," and that was like if they really did have a boyfriend. And if they were using the boyfriend as an excuse, they'd be like, "No, I have a boyfriend." Their boyfriend cop out excuse. And of course, like I realize that now that it's kind of weird to like just blindly walk up to somebody and be like, "Hey, would you like to go on a date?" Based on nothing but this experience, be like, "I looked at
Yeah.
you and you looked at me. We should go out on a date."
Yeah, I don't think that's like the quite the best way to
Yeah.
succeed at going on dates.
Well, let's just say like I mean, this is the thing is that that's not really. I'd have to say that even though I went on tons of dates, I would not recommend it because I had plenty of first dates, but almost no second dates.
Yeah, wow. Well, how many first dates do you think you went on?
It kind of gets lost in the jumble, just because, like I said, like most of what I remember is asking out women, because I asked out way more women than I ever went on dates with, right? And because I was a little bit stupid and younger and stuff like that, I went on plenty of like basically dates where there was no interaction, like going to a movie, for instance, or um, trying to remember what some of the other dates that we went on. Like it's funny, I don't even like remember any of the dates.
Wow. Well, that
Well,
tells you
not even
something.
that. Like it's like I know I went hikes, and one girl I did the planetarium at the time, so one of the girls wanted to
That's cool.
see the planetarium, and so that like became like a thing where I was like, hey, do you want to see the planetarium? But yeah, so yeah, I don't remember. I actually don't remember the dates. I remember more asking out the women, and so. But I would say that like because I had like a date like every other week, and of course my roommates at the time, like there was like I developed this sort of mythos or legend around me, because they knew that I went on all of these dates, and they were basically like, how does he do it? And none of them believed me that I just asked out tons and tons of women. Like none of them wanted to believe that I just asked out random women. Like whenever I came up with like a girl that I thought was like cute, I'd be like, hey, my name's Ben. How are you doing? You want to go on a date? I was thinking that we'd go bowling or maybe pool. I don't know if you enjoy those things, but we should go. That would be like my sort of my shtick or whatever I was gonna do, right? None of my friends or roommates basically believed that this was possible. So because of this, instead, they thought that I had like this magical Don Juan aura about me, that I was able to go on all these dates. They're just like, I don't know what girl will see in him, but he is like a new girl every week. Like,
Well, obviously that's not true. You're just normal.
yeah, it was so far from the truth, but it's like, and of course, like the dates were like really, they were not quality dates or anything like that, because of course you're meeting with a total stranger, and there's all the awkwardness of meeting a total stranger and trying to like put those two things in some sort of romantic setting where you're supposed to like enjoy your time together and think that they're all attractive and cute. It just doesn't really work. Like really you need to like have some sort of rapport or enjoyable experience with them to like really make it a quality experience.
Well, so how many second dates did you go on?
Yeah, probably about 10.
That's not bad. That's not terrible.
Yeah, it's not bad, but like when you compare to like the first dates, it was like ask out 100 women to get one date. No, ask out like 50 women to get one date. Go on like 50 dates to get one second date. It was like there was a lot of attrition by numbers.
All right. Well, I think it's time we wrap this up. I want to thank you guys all for listening. Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
This has been a Gravity Well podcast. Thank you for listening, and have a lovely day. We'll see you next time.